The conference room smelled like stale coffee and corporate ambition. I was mid-sentence, explaining Q3 performance metrics, when Victor stood up and cut me off. "Natasha, we've made a decision." My voice caught. His tone wasn't collaborative. It was final. "Effective immediately, your position is being eliminated. Your last day is today." The room went silent. 20 pairs of eyes shifted between me and Victor like they were watching a tennis match. My hands went cold. The spreadsheet in front of me, the one showing my numbers in green, my quarterly goals exceeded, my client satisfaction ratings at 97%, suddenly felt like evidence of nothing. HR sat 2 chairs down, her arms folded, not meeting my gaze. "There's a severance package," Victor continued, sliding a manila envelope across the table. "Security will walk you out." I wanted to speak. My mouth opened and closed like a fish drowning in air. Behind Victor's head, the dashboard we all used daily glowed on the monitor. My name was still there. My metrics were still there. All green. All successful. "Do you have any questions?" Victor asked, already checking his watch. I had 1,000 questions. But the only one that mattered was the one I couldn't ask out loud. Why? Why fire your top performer in front of the entire team? Why do it this way? And what was he really hiding? Walking out of that building with a cardboard box felt like a scene from a movie I never wanted to star in. Except this was real. The elevator doors closed behind me. My ID badge, the one I'd swiped every morning for 3 years, suddenly felt heavy in my pocket. "My name is Natasha Vasquez. I'm 31 years old. I have a master's degree in business analytics and a track record of making other people look good." That last part wasn't a strength. It was a problem. The humiliation burned first. Immediate. Like someone had lit a match inside my chest. But confusion burned hotter. In my car, I sat with my hands on the steering wheel, replaying Victor's tone. He'd practiced that speech. His cold delivery, the rehearsed pause before "effective immediately." None of it was spontaneous. He'd planned this. Probably rehearsed it with HR. Maybe even announced it to the team before the meeting so they'd have their phones ready to avoid eye contact. I'd worked under Victor for 2 years. Before that, I'd reported to his predecessor, who'd actually valued my work. But when Victor was promoted, everything changed. Suddenly my reports needed adjustments. My client meetings were scheduled without me. And credit for my strategies started flowing in his direction. I'd been quiet about it. Too quiet. As I sat in that parking lot, staring at my reflection in the rearview mirror, I realized something. Victor hadn't fired me because I was bad at my job. He'd fired me because I was too good at it. And he was afraid of what I knew. My hands shook as I opened my laptop in the car. It was stupid. Maybe dangerous. But I had to know. I typed my login credentials. The system took a moment. Then, access granted. My stomach dropped. They hadn't deactivated me yet. Which meant I could see everything. All the raw data. All the unedited reports. All the files that told the real story of who did the actual work in that department. I scrolled through the shared drive with my heart pounding. Performance logs. Client communications. Project archives. The metadata on every file showed creation dates, edit histories, who made changes and when. The truth was sitting right there, untouched and undeniable. I downloaded everything. Project files going back 18 months. Reports in their original form before Victor's adjustments. Email chains showing my recommendations, my strategies, my ideas. And Victor's name appearing later as the one presenting them. My hands trembled as the progress bar filled. 40%, 60%, 95%. Complete. I closed the laptop and took a breath. I wasn't sure what I was going to do with this information yet. But I knew one thing for certain. Victor had made a massive mistake. He should have locked me out before firing me. He should have locked me out the moment he decided to take credit for my work. But he hadn't. And now, every piece of evidence, every timestamp, every email, every original draft was mine. I needed to understand how I'd gotten here. So I rewound in my mind to where it all started to fall apart. 3 months earlier, Victor had called me into his office with an apologetic smile. "I need your help," he'd said. "I've been drowning in the Riverside client account. Can you take a look at the strategy?" I'd said yes because that's what I did. I was the fixer, the invisible problem solver. For 6 weeks, I'd restructured the entire Riverside account. I'd identified inefficiencies in their supply chain communications, redesigned their reporting system, and built a strategy that would cut their operational costs by 18%. I'd presented it to Victor as a draft. "Here's what I'm thinking," I'd said, walking through the analysis line by line. He'd nodded, asked a few surface-level questions, and thanked me. 2 days later, Victor had presented that strategy to the Riverside team. Word for word. My words. My analysis. My ideas. But in the presentation he'd said, "We've developed a comprehensive approach." Not, Natasha developed. Just we. The Riverside client had loved it. They'd increased our contract by 30%. And Victor had been praised at the next board meeting for the account growth. Kept quiet. Too quiet. Then it happened again with another client. And another. Each time I'd fix something broken. Each time Victor took the credit. Each time I told myself it didn't matter because the work was good and the clients were happy and that was what mattered, right? Except it mattered to my paycheck. It mattered to my career trajectory. It mattered to my confidence. And by the time I realized how badly I'd been played, it was too late. Victor had already decided I was a liability. The warning signs had arrived in May when Victor hired a new analyst named Marcus. Marcus was young, eager, and frustratingly similar to Victor. He used the same corporate phrases. He asked the same surface-level questions. He smiled the same nervous smile. And within a week, he and Victor were inseparable. "I'd like Marcus to shadow the Martinez project," Victor had announced in a team meeting. Good development opportunity for him. But shadowing wasn't what happened. Instead, my report started coming back with Marcus's name in the author field. My spreadsheets were being adjusted before client presentation. Meetings were scheduled in rooms I didn't have access to. One afternoon, I'd overheard Victor coaching Marcus outside the break room. "When you present these numbers, lead with confidence. Natasha's analysis is solid, but you need to own it. Make it sound like you developed the approach, not just inherited it." That's when I knew. Victor wasn't training his replacement. He was creating one. And he was doing it by erasing me. I considered going to HR. I'd even drafted an email once, late at night, explaining the situation. But I'd never hit send. Because in my experience, HR doesn't protect employees who rock the boat. HR protects companies. So instead, I'd made a silent decision. I would stop trying to make Victor look good. I would start making myself visible. But not yet. Not obviously. First, I needed to understand the full scope of what was happening. The moment that crystallized everything came during a client call with Riverside in late June. "Victor, we just wanted to say how impressed we've been with your strategic thinking," the Riverside CFO said. "That supply chain approach you proposed. It's generated over $2 million in savings already." Victor beamed. "Thank you. It's a collaborative effort, of course, but I'm proud of the outcome." I was listening from the background, muted, just supposed to take notes. And in that moment I realized something crucial. The CFO had no idea who actually created that strategy. To them, Victor was the strategist. Victor was the leader. Victor was the one who deserved to be invited to their executive meetings. And I was nobody. The call ended. Victor's face flushed with pride as he closed his laptop. I congratulated him quietly. "Great call." He'd smiled at me, that patronizing smile, and said, "Thanks for the support, Natasha. You're a great team player." Team player. That's what they called you when they were taking credit for your work. Later that week, I'd made a decision. I would stop correcting him publicly when he misrepresented the work. I would stop explaining myself in meetings. I would become invisible, but intentionally. And I would start documenting everything. From that moment forward, I changed my approach completely. When Victor took credit for my analysis in a meeting, I didn't raise my hand. I didn't say, "Actually, I did that." I just let it happen. When Marcus presented my spreadsheet as his own analysis, I didn't object. I smiled politely and kept notes. But privately I became meticulous. Every email I sent went into a secure folder. Every project file I created was saved with the original timestamp preserved. Every conversation I had about strategy was followed up with a per-hour discussion email that included the details. I started a document, project log. In it, I recorded dates, client names, specific deliverables, and descriptions of the work I'd done. I noted when it was presented under Victor's name. I took screenshots of reports before they were adjusted. By August, I had a 7-page document with 17 instances of intellectual property theft, if you wanted to be technical about it. 14 instances if you excluded the ones where Victor could claim it was collaborative work. But even the most generous interpretation showed a pattern. Victor presented my work as his own, took promotions based on credit he didn't earn, and was systematically eliminating me from projects so Marcus could take my place. I didn't know yet what I would do with this information. But I knew I was going to be ready. Back in my car after being fired, I opened my laptop and pulled up the performance dashboard one more time. This time, I didn't just look at the green numbers next to my name. I looked at the metadata. Every metric on that system had an audit trail. Who ran the report? When it was generated? Who viewed it? The system was designed for transparency. Probably because upper management wanted to track performance without relying on managers to tell the truth. Turns out upper management was right to be suspicious. I pulled the last 6 months of dashboard exports. Then I compared them to the original files stored in the archive. And there it was, the pattern. When clients reported satisfaction with Victor's strategies, the dashboard showed the work was completed on dates when Victor was on vacation. Or in meetings. Or, according to the calendar system I'd hacked into using my still active credentials. Not even in the office. But I was in the office. I'd completed the work. And the timestamps proved it. The authorship trails in the system showed file creation dates, modification histories, and the user IDs of everyone who'd touched a document. Victor's user ID appeared on reports only after I'd submitted them. He'd opened them, modified the headers, changed the presenter name from Natasha to Victor, then submitted them as complete work. This wasn't a gray area of collaborative authorship. This was straightforward document falsification. Timestamps don't lie. Neither do authorship trails. And Victor had left a paper trail a blind person could follow. The next morning, an email landed in my inbox from the HR department. Subject: Separation details. Dear Natasha, per your separation from company name, please find attached your severance agreement and benefits information. Your final paycheck will be deposited on date. Your health insurance will terminate on date. Unless you elect COBRA coverage. If you have any questions regarding the separation, please contact our department. Best regards, Human Resources. The email was generic. Templated. Probably sent to everyone who was fired. No acknowledgement of my performance. No mention of my metrics. No explanation. Just administrative details wrapped in corporate language that made my erasure sound clinical and final. I stared at the email for a long time. Then I typed a response. Dear HR, thank you for the separation details. Before I sign the severance agreement, I have a few questions I'd like to clarify with your department. Can you provide documentation of the performance issues that led to my termination? I was not made aware of any formal warnings or improvement plans. My performance metrics from Q1 through present show above-average results across all categories. Can you explain how elimination was justified? Several client projects list me as the original analyst. Can you clarify the authorization for changing project attribution after completion? I'd like to schedule a call to discuss these items before proceeding with the agreement. Thank you, Natasha Vasquez. I read it 3 times. It was polite, professional, but it asked questions they wouldn't expect. I hit send before I could second-guess myself. Then I waited. While waiting for HR to respond, I did something I'd been planning for weeks. I built a comprehensive report. Not an angry letter. Not a complaint document. Just a report. Title: Project Attribution and Performance Metrics Analysis. I documented every major project from the past 18 months. For each one I listed project name and client original completion date, my role and deliverables, the presented outcome, credit assigned, client satisfaction score. Then I calculated average performance of projects attributed to me. 94.3% average performance of projects attributed to Victor. 89.2%, but here's what made it devastating. I correlated the data with client feedback. When clients praised Victor's work, they were specifically praising the analysis and strategy components, the parts I'd created. When the projects had less successful outcomes, Victor had actually been more involved in the execution. The pattern was undeniable. Victor was credited for successes and distanced from failures. I added a column for profit impact. Each project I'd led had generated measurable value. Some saved clients money. Some increased efficiency. Some opened new revenue streams. I calculated the total financial impact of my work over 18 months. $12,800,000. Victor's documented contributions. $3.2 million. The difference was $9.6 million in value that Victor had claimed credit for but hadn't actually created. I didn't include accusations in the report. I didn't say Victor stole from me. I just let the numbers speak. And they screamed. That evening I had dinner with my family. My mom had insisted, said she needed to see my face after hearing about the firing. We sat around Mom's kitchen table, the same table where I'd done homework, learned to cook, and processed every major life decision. My sister Lucia was there too, worried lines forming on her forehead. "You should just move on," Lucia said, stabbing her salad. "Take some time. Apply to new jobs. Don't get stuck in anger." Mom nodded in agreement, reaching over to squeeze my hand. "Mija, I know it's unfair, but sometimes these things happen. You're smart. You'll find something better." I appreciated their support. I did. But they didn't understand that this wasn't about anger. It was about something deeper. "I'm not going to spend months applying to jobs and pretending this is fine," I said quietly. "Because it's not fine. And there's more going on than just a firing." "What do you mean?" Mom asked, her protective instinct activating. I explained the situation. The credit stealing. The project attribution. The systematic erasure of my work. The new hire being trained to replace me. Lucia rolled her eyes. "That happens everywhere, Natasha. Corporate life is ugly. You get over it and move forward." "No," I said. "I'm not moving forward. Not yet." "What are you going to do?" Mom asked, worry creeping into her voice. "You need health insurance. You need income." "I know," I said. "And I'll figure that out. But first I need to make sure this is actually documented. I need to make sure there's a record of what happened." My mom and sister exchanged looks. They thought I was being vindictive. They thought I was making this worse than it was. But they didn't know what I knew. They didn't have the files. They didn't have the metadata. They didn't have the math that proved Victor's entire reputation was built on stolen work. 3 days after my firing, I received an email from a Riverside client contact, someone I'd worked with directly during the supply chain project. Subject: question about recent proposal. "Hi Natasha. I'm trying to track down the original analysis from the supply chain restructuring project we completed last spring. Victor sent us a new proposal for Q4 work, but it references some specific data points from the original strategy that I can't find in our current files. I remember you presenting the initial findings. Would you have a copy of the original framework? I want to make sure we're building on the right foundation for the next phase. Thanks, Michael." I read the email 3 times. My heart jumped. He was asking for the original analysis. Not Victor's version. The actual one I'd created. And he was confused because Victor's new proposal didn't match the original work. This was important. This was ammunition. But not yet. Timing mattered. I couldn't respond directly. If I sent him the original analysis now, it would look like I was a disgruntled former employee trying to undermine my old boss. Instead, I filed the email away. I noted the date. I marked it as evidence. But I didn't reply, because I was waiting for something bigger. A week after my firing, a company-wide email announcement appeared in my inbox. Subject: Annual Performance Audit. All departments effective immediately. All departments will undergo a comprehensive audit of project delivery, client satisfaction, and financial performance. This audit will be conducted by an external third party to ensure accuracy and accountability. All managers are required to provide documentation of project completion, client feedback, and performance metrics for the past 18 months. This audit was routine. The company did it every year. But this year it landed right in the middle of my situation. I checked Victor's LinkedIn profile out of curiosity. His headline had changed. Before it said Senior Business Analyst Strategy Development. Now it said Senior Business Analyst Strategic Oversight. And there was a new line in his summary. Led key account strategies generating $8 million plus in client value in FY23. $8 million. He'd lowercased it and attributed it to a fiscal year. But that was the number. My work. My money. His LinkedIn profile. I smiled when I read it. Not a happy smile. A knowing one. The audit was coming. And Victor, in his arrogance, had just updated his public professional profile to brag about the exact accomplishments that were about to be scrutinized. He'd practically gift-wrapped the evidence for the auditors. I scheduled a consultation with an employment attorney on a Friday afternoon. Her name was Nora Owens, and her office was sparse but professional, the kind of space that made you feel like she took things seriously. I brought my files. All of them. The project logs. The screenshots. The downloads. The metadata comparisons. The financial impact analysis. Nora read through everything slowly. Methodically. Her face remained neutral as she worked, but I could see her eyes moving faster and faster through the documents. When she finished, she looked up at me over her reading glasses. "This is clean," she said. "What do you mean?" I asked. "I mean this is one of the clearest cases of intellectual property theft and workplace discrimination I've seen. This is airtight." She flipped back through a few pages. "Victor didn't just take credit for your work. He systematically falsified documents to make it look like his contributions were larger than they were. That's fraud, Natasha. That's not just unethical. It's illegal. Can I do something about it?" I asked. "You can," Nora said carefully. "But before we talk about litigation, I want to understand what you actually want. Do you want money? Do you want your job back? Do you want him fired?" I thought about that question. I said slowly, "him to face consequences for what he did. Real consequences." Nora nodded. "Then we have options. But they require documentation of the crime, which you have. And they require patience, which you might not have." "I'm patient," I said. "Then," she said, closing my file, "we wait for the audit." Nora and I spent the next week with a forensic IT consultant, going through the actual system metadata that I'd preserved. What we found was worse than I'd thought. Victor hadn't just changed document headers. He'd actively altered timestamps on several files to make it appear as though he'd worked on projects before I had. He'd used his administrative access to modify completion dates. Essentially, he'd rewritten history in the digital record. The IT consultant, a quiet woman named Dr. Angela Moore, created a detailed report showing 23 instances of document metadata manipulation, 17 instances of false authorship attribution, 9 instances of altered completion dates, 6 instances of modified financial figures. Each instance was a policy violation. Collectively, they constituted fraud. "This is deliberate," Dr. Moore said, reviewing her findings. "This isn't someone making mistakes or forgetting to update a file. This is someone systematically altering records over time." Nora leaned back in her chair. "He buried his tracks carefully. But not carefully enough." "What now?" I asked. "Now," Nora said, We let the audit find what we already know, and we document what they find. When they start asking questions, we have answers. 2 weeks after the audit began, HR contacted me. They wanted a clarification meeting about my departure. They were gentle about it. Polite language, no accusations. But the message was clear. They wanted to know my side of the story. I agreed. And I did something that would matter later. I asked if I could record the meeting for my own records. HR hesitated but agreed. For clarity, they said. The meeting was on a Tuesday afternoon. Me, Nora, who sat beside me, and 2 HR representatives. I explained the situation calmly. I showed my project documentation. I walked through my timeline. 3 years of work, 18 months of escalating credit theft, 6 weeks of being systematically phased out. The HR representatives listened without interrupting. Then they played a recording of my firing meeting. As they did, Victor appeared on a video call. He was joining remotely, which struck me as odd. Natasha, Victor said, his voice tight. I'm not sure where this is coming from. We worked closely together. Yes, I took the lead on presentations, but that was my role as your manager. I'd been waiting for him to talk. Because Victor had a problem. He couldn't shut up. The work was collaborative, he continued. Yes, Natasha did analysis, but I directed the strategy. I made the decisions. She implemented my vision. Can you provide documentation of that direction? Nora interrupted. Emails. Meeting notes. Project plans where you outline the strategic vision before Natasha's analysis. Silence. I don't have to document every. Actually, Nora said, in cases of disputed project attribution you do. Especially when the disputed work generates millions in client value. Victor's face went pale on the screen. I didn't say anything. I just let him talk. And he talked in circles, contradicting himself, making the hole deeper. By the end of the call, even the HR representatives were taking notes. With HR's permission, I forwarded the Riverside client email to the compliance department. I didn't accuse anyone. I just provided context. Subject. Clarification on project attribution. I wanted to ensure accuracy in our records regarding the Riverside supply chain project completed in Q2. Client contact Michael, last name. Has inquired about the original framework because recent proposals reference data that may not be accurately attributed. I'm attaching the original project deliverables as reference. The web tightened. Michael from Riverside started asking questions. He reached out directly to HR asking why there were discrepancies in who created what. He wanted clarity before authorizing the next phase of work with the company. And suddenly, multiple clients were having the same realization. They weren't working with Victor. They'd been working with me. Victor had just been the middleman. About 2 weeks into the audit, something beautiful happened. The company assigned Marcus, the new analyst, Victor's chosen replacement, to a major client presentation without me there to support him. Marcus presented a project strategy that he claimed to have developed. But he couldn't answer basic questions about the analysis. When the client asked him to walk through the methodology, he froze. When they asked him to defend the approach, he stumbled. When they asked him to discuss modifications for their specific needs, he looked lost. Because he hadn't created it. And Victor had just handed him the presentation, expecting him to understand something he'd never built. The mask slipped in real time. The client pushed back. They weren't confident in Marcus's understanding. They asked for a follow-up meeting with someone who understood the original analysis. Marcus's eyes widened. He said he'd get back to them. That phone call went directly to HR because it was a client satisfaction issue. And suddenly, HR was asking Victor why a junior analyst had been presenting work that neither of them could defend. The compliance department, as part of the audit, requested original drafts of all significant projects from the past 18 months. This was the moment everything crystallized. I had the originals, dated, timestamp, in my folders. Victor had revisions, modified versions, files that had been edited and re-edited. But he didn't have the originals. And in project management, the original draft is everything. Shows intent. Shows process. Shows who did the actual thinking. Victor's silence on providing the originals was deafening. 3 weeks into the audit, a neutral summary landed on executive desks. I wasn't supposed to see it. But Nora had a contact at the company who sent her a copy. The summary didn't mention names. It outlined patterns. Projects attributed to one senior analyst showed creation dates that didn't match project completion timelines. Client feedback specifically praised analytical components, but documentation showed those components were created by other team members. Document metadata indicated systematic alteration of authorship records. One junior analyst had been positioned as a successor to a senior role despite producing no independently verified work. The patterns were damning. And they led directly to Victor. The executives would understand. They'd be reading between lines, but they'd understand. HR called me on a Tuesday morning. The tone was different. Apologetic almost. Natasha, the HR director said, we've completed our preliminary review, and we'd like to discuss the possibility of reinstatement. Would you be open to returning to your position? I let the silence hang for a moment. Then I said, no. She sounded surprised. Not even if we offered a raise. A promotion to a different team. No, I said again. I'm not coming back. Can I ask why? She said carefully. Because, I said, I've spent the last 3 years making other people successful. And I realized I don't want to do that anymore. I want to build something for myself. There was a pause. I understand, she said. But we'd like the opportunity to make this right. Would you consider discussing it further? No, I said. But I appreciate the offer. I hung up before she could say anything else. Within 48 hours, 3 things happened simultaneously. First, Victor was placed on administrative leave pending the completion of the audit investigation. Second, his LinkedIn headline disappeared entirely. His profile went blank. His summary vanished. His accomplishments were erased. Third, office whispers began. They spread like wildfire through the company, carried by people who'd seen him get exposed, who'd watched him spiral when he realized the evidence was real. By Friday, everyone knew. Victor hadn't made a mistake. He'd committed fraud. 2 weeks later, I received an email from the company announcing that Victor Thompson has decided to pursue other opportunities and will be transitioning out of his role effective immediately. No farewell party. No send-off email. No LinkedIn announcement about his new chapter. He just disappeared. I found out later that he'd resigned without notice. No reference. No bonus. No severance negotiation because he was in no position to negotiate. His reputation, the one built on stolen work, quietly collapsed. In professional circles, he became unemployable. Nobody wanted to hire someone with a documented history of credit theft. Nobody wanted to trust someone who'd been caught rewriting records. He'd built his entire career on my work. And when the truth came out, there was nothing left. 1 month after Victor resigned, I received a call from Michael at Riverside, the client who'd first noticed the discrepancies. Natasha, he said, I'm starting a new firm, a strategy consulting company, and I need someone who actually understands how to build long-term analytical frameworks. Someone I can trust. Someone like you. He offered me a senior analyst role. Better pay than I'd been making. Equity in the company. Creative control over projects. Respect. I accepted without hesitation. For the first time in years, I wasn't invisible. I wasn't the fixer in the background. I was the one being recognized for my actual work. As I signed the offer letter, I didn't feel anger toward Victor anymore. Felt clarity. Months later, I passed the old building where I'd been fired. No bitterness. No revenge fantasies. Just a simple observation. Life moves forward. I'd learned something during those months. Something that went deeper than just one manager's theft. Arrogance always leaves evidence. People who take credit for work they didn't do eventually get caught because the work doesn't match their understanding. The ideas don't align with their capabilities. The numbers don't add up. And numbers, when you respect them, never lie. They can be manipulated. They can be hidden. They can be ignored. But eventually they're audited. They're questioned. They're compared against reality. I didn't destroy Victor. He destroyed himself. I just made sure the evidence couldn't be ignored.